Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, you all are having a wonderful day today. So, when it comes down to it, I thought that I would give my little fight prediction and also have a little bit of a conversation about this Keith Thurman versus Mario Barrios fight. And of course, this fight I believe happens sometime within the next couple of weeks. I believe that this fight happens within the first week of February, and that this is actually going to be, I believe it's going to be on February 5th. If I'm wrong about that, someone correct me. And I believe that this is actually going to be a fight on pay per view. And from what I've heard, the price of the pay per view, all in all, is apparently going to be about $75. We'll see, all in all, how true that is. But from what I've heard, all in all, I mean, I have no, I don't really have a reason to not believe it. It seems like, all in all, that may be the price. And to be quite honest with you, I'm not so sure about that. I'm not so sure about the pay per view price when it comes down to it being $75. Maybe Al Heyman, maybe his thought process is when it comes down to what is that, Keith Thurman fighting this guy Mario Barrios. The Mario Barrios versus Gervonta Tank Davis fight. I think that was a fight that did anywhere from 350,000 to 450,000 pay per view buys, which is not too bad when you consider where Gervonta Tank Davis is at the point in time in his career. At the current moment in time, and also in my opinion, considering that Mario Barrios, he didn't really have a whole lot of star power behind him, but he was an undefeated fighter. So my point being is this: the Gervonta Tank Davis versus Mario Barrios fight at the time had some sort of appeal. Now, at the time, I was not really the biggest supporter of the fight because I didn't really think Mario Barrios was an A-grade fighter. And like I said, I always review a certain amount of videos from certain boxing channels, especially whether it be from Dante's Boxing Nation or Boxing Ego or yada yada yada, Aki TV, certain channels that are part of the new media role when it comes down to it. And of course, we all know that the main fighter that they love to attack is Mr. Saul Canelo Alvarez. And like I said, I'm not just some Canelo Alvarez fanboy. Like I said, I don't like the fanboy or over any of these fighters. That way, I keep my logic and objectivity. But when you take a look at Mr. Saul Canelo Alvarez, you can tell that he is facing legitimate A-grade fighters. At least usually, not only that, but that he's taking fights that have somewhat of interest to the public. How do I know that? Because the pay-per-view numbers don't lie. There are certain numbers overall that you can sort of manipulate when it comes down to it. There's certain statistics that maybe you cannot trust. But if you ever want to know the answer to how entertaining of a fight, a lot of people think that it is going to be, or how good of a fight is, take a look overall at the pay-per-view numbers when it comes down to it, or at least overall if that fight has some sort of appeal, because the fans will tell you if they think all in all that it is a good fight. That's why Canelo Alvarez, they can say whatever they want to, but there's a reason why Canelo Alvarez in his last fight against Caleb Plant did 900,000 pay-per-view buys. You don't, and I've already said this repeatedly, you don't pull 900,000 pay-per-view buys just out of your ass. It is what it is. But there's a reason why Gervonta Tank Davis, for example, in his last fight against Isaac Pitbull Cruz, which in my opinion was not the greatest of fights. Isaac Pitbull Cruz is a guy that already has a loss in his record. Now, of course, that being stated, I do think that he's a better fighter than what he was back then. But when it comes down to it, like I said, Isaac Pitbull Cruz has never won a belt in his career. He already has a loss when it comes down to it. And he hasn't really beat anyone overall worth of substance, at least when they've been in their prime. So it just is what it is. So in Gervonta Tank Davis, who clearly is on the upper echelon in terms of talent, when he was fighting someone like that, no one really bought the fight. And that's why, when I was reviewing a certain amount of these channels, when it came down to it, ones that were really highly trying to protect Gervonta Tank Davis, like a Boxing Ego or one of these other channels, they all basically say, oh, well, why are people pocket watching Gervonta Tank Davis and worrying about his pay-per-view numbers? It's not really pocket watching. It's just wondering all in all how the pay-per-view numbers did. That's all it is. Just like overall they may do with Saul Canelo Alvarez or someone else that they may not like. But of course, once again, and I've already explained this, they have to protect Gervonta Tank Davis because he is one of their main assets. So it is what it is. But it's sort of a similar thing here. In my opinion, for a pay-per-view fight to sell, I think that it has a great amount of appeal. It has to have a great storyline. I guess, this fight right here, this pay-per-view fight, it has a little bit of a storyline. A lot of the fighters that, are going to be on this card, they are coming back from losses. Not only just losses, but knockout losses. In each and every single one of these fights, there's at least one fighter that is coming off of a loss or coming off of a knockout loss. Whether it be Mario Barrios, Luis Neri, who just lost to Brandon Figueroa, who lost to, Stephen, cool Boy Fulton, I believe. And then, of course, you have, Leo Santa Cruz, who in his last fight against Gervonta Tank Davis got knocked out stiff, which I believe was a couple of years ago. So, I think I can somewhat get the marketing campaign where not only you say that these fighters are coming back, but Keith Thurman and Terrence Bud Crawford, if you are trying to get that fight out there, and if you really overall want to sell that pay-per-view out to the public, I'm talking about Terrence Crawford versus Keith one-time Thurman, I can somewhat understand why you're trying to put it on pay-per-view, and you're basically saying, okay, well, maybe I can match up Keith Thurman against Mario Barrios. Not only is he a Mexican-American fighter, and they have a decent fan base, and, Mario Barrios, he just came off of a decently successful pay-per-view against Gervonta Tank Davis, so he has a certain amount of acclaim. I can somewhat see it, but for those of us overall that really know overall what we're watching, and even for the casual fans that may not know as much and may not be as much in the know, who really is going to be interested in buying this pay-per-view fight, especially for that of $75? I mean, just in my personal opinion, I'm not really going to buy this fight. I'm not really interested in this fight. And it's not necessarily that I couldn't get this fight or that a lot of other people probably couldn't get this fight. But to be quite honest with you, I don't even know if I'd watch this pay-per-view card for free. It just is what it is. I mean, if it was on Showtime app or something, maybe I'd tune in, if there was nothing else on. But I mean, for example, would I watch this, and I'm a person that loves watching boxing. That's my favorite sport usually over everything else. But right now, there's certain things on like the Australian Open and the NFL playoffs. And I mean, do you think people overall are going to be watching this over a certain amount of other sporting events that are on? Not really. It is what it is. I think I can somewhat see the appeal. You want to match up Keith Thurman very carefully in his next fight if you want to try to sell that Keith Thurman versus Terrence Bud Crawford fight, because of course Terrence Bud Crawford, he looked phenomenal in that Sean Porter fight. He dominated him like no one else has before, and people now take a look at Terrence Bud Crawford mostly as the favorite to take over that welterweight division, especially if there is a big Errol Spence Jr. versus Terrence Bud Crawford fight. So I kind of understand the appeal. You want to make Keith Thurman look good. I don't think there's necessarily a bad matchup because I understand, but I'm a little bit surprised that this is on pay-per-view. I'm a little bit surprised that this is on pay-per-view, especially for the price of $75, if that is true. Reason why that is because I don't really know anyone who's going to be interested in this fight. Because I think even the casual fans know that more than likely that this is just a tune-up fight. It's pretty much a showcase fight. And if you're asking me about my prediction, I mean, there's really not much to say in this video, in my opinion. I have Keith one-time Thurman winning this fight. I think that more than likely he's going to win it by domination. I think that Mario Barrios, I think really what he is, he actually reminds me of a weaker version of Keith Thurman. That's what he reminds me of. He reminds me overall of a lesser version of Keith Thurman. Two fighters all in all that, have very decent power, but all in all don't have a great head movement, have very leaky defenses. But the difference is that Keith Thurman, in my opinion, was better during his peak and probably is even still better now. And on top of that, I think that both fighters are going to be decently focused for this fight. Keith Thurman sounds like he wants a big fight next and that he wants to redeem himself. But we'll see what happens. I don't know if Keith Thurman is necessarily the same fighter that he was once upon a time. He's had a multitude of injuries when it came down to it. And on top of that, he is coming off of a loss, to a Manny Pacquiao. So we'll see all in all what happens. But like I said, when it comes down to it, I don't know. I don't think that this pay-per-view is going to do a lot of buys. But like I said, Keith Thurman, in my opinion, just to get into my prediction, I think that Keith Thurman, he's probably more than likely going to beat Mario Barrios very dominantly. Would not be surprised if there was a stoppage, but I'm actually not going to say that Keith one-time Thurman stops Mario Barrios. I think Mario Barrios will at least be able to stay in the fight. I think that it would be a good thing, actually, if Keith one-time Thurman was able to knock out Mario Barrios within the first half of the fight or within the first 7-8 rounds, so that Terrence Bud Crawford versus Keith one-time Thurman fight can do, overall some decent money. But when it comes down to it, if Keith Thurman, if he even goes to the 12th round decision, if he doesn't stop this dude, I don't see Keith Thurman over having a chance at all against Terrence Bud Crawford. I just don't. I think that Keith Thurman, not only has he had a couple of injuries, he's coming off of a loss against Manny Pacquiao 3 years ago. The dude hasn't fought in 3 years when it comes down to it. And in his last fight against Josesito Lopez, if that would have been a Keith Thurman, in my opinion, that would have been a little bit younger, he probably would have stopped Josesito Lopez's. In my opinion, Keith Thurman, he looked a little bit better in the Manny Pacquiao fight than what he actually did in the Josesito Lopez fight. And some people may say, well, why do you say that? He just looked to me like he was in elite conditioning. He looked like he was better mentally for that fight, because if the Keith Thurman showed up that was in the Josesito Lopez fight, I think that he would have gotten stopped. Now, Keith Thurman, he may do that once again. He may show up in better form overall, maybe in the Terrence Bud Crawford fight than maybe what he would in this fight. But I don't know. We'll have to see what happens. I really need to see what form, Keith Thurman is in. And when it comes down to it, like I said, if this fight is even the slightest competitive, I don't see Keith Thurman versus Terrence Bud Crawford doing great numbers. I just don't see it. Don't get me wrong. I think that it's a decent fight. But if Keith Thurman, all in all, if he's not matched up well, like in this fight against Mario Barrios, I don't really know how he's going to do it, but we'll see what happens. I do think Keith Thurman, all in all, still seems to be a decent fighter. He still definitely has some star power. I just don't think that this is going to do a great amount of numbers. I don't think that it does anything more than 150,000 pay-per-view buys. If I'm wrong about that, then I'll be pleasantly surprised. But I just don't know anyone overall who's personally going to be wanting to watch this. All these fighters are pretty much coming off of losses. You have Luis Neri in a comeback fight, in a tune-up fight. You have Leo Santa Cruz in a tune-up fight, in a comeback fight, in a showcase fight. And you have Keith One-Time Thurman in a showcase fight. So, I don't know. We'll see what happens, but in my personal opinion, I think Keith Thurman, I think he's going to be a little bit too big, a little bit too strong, a little bit too skilled, a little bit too athletic for that of Mario Barrios. I've never really looked at Mario Barrios overall as an A-grade fighter. I just never have. Keith Thurman, at least at one point in time, I would give him the grade of A. So we'll see all in all what happens. It'll be very particularly interesting, but I got Keith One-Time Thurman in this fight, at least winning by that of unanimous decision. So it should be very, very particularly interesting. But that's pretty much it about for the video. I think that Keith Thurman, all in all, is more than likely going to get him. More than likely, there's also a possibility that he can knock him down a multitude of times. It'll be very, very interesting. But anyways, that's pretty much it about for the video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll talk to you all later.